This great plant right here is one of the most widely used medicinal plants on earth. It's a member of the aster family, and this is called yarrow. It's very common and even considered invasive in some places. A good tip, the genus of this plant, or this species, was named after Achilles, who many people know is a mythological Greek warrior who used yarrow to stop bleeding. So yarrow, being a biennial, first year yarrow will not produce flowers. It'll grow low to the ground, just as is with its green foliage, and in its second year will ultimately die and reproduce new plants by flowers and eventually seed pods from its flower heads. It's generally growing anywhere from 1 to 3 feet tall when it's fully mature. First year growing very low to the ground like this. This plant isn't known very much for its uses as food. This is more of a medicinal plant than anything. This is most notably used to stop bleeding. Blood clotting. It's usually dried or prepared as a wash and put over cuts to stop bleeding. It greatly speeds up your blood's ability to coagulate and stop a cut. The leaves on yarrow are extremely fine and feather-like. They're pinnate. The stems are also fine and covered in a cottony kind of substance, which some may need a magnifying glass to see. Most plants you can see just fine though. It's been used as an antiseptic. It's been used as a sedative. It's been used as an anti-inflammatory. Right over here, I have a good view of dying second-year yarrow plants. You can see right here, flowers are long gone, and the seeds here, there's thousands of seeds to a plant. They're very fine and small. They're dropping off to produce new plants in this patch here. Here's a good view of the stem, where the leaves are alternating along the stem. When yarrow's in flower, the flower heads are off-white, a dull white, sometimes a cream color, and they're not one big umbel like seen in a carrot. For the most part, the flower heads alternate off the stem all the way up it, and the farther up you go, the denser and denser they alternate until eventually you get their little tiny flower heads. Even the flower heads themselves alternate very finely, right up to the top. Here's a view of one that's still got its some of its white flowers here. This plant's slightly astringent. Astringent meaning it constricts skin like alum powder when you put it in your mouth. If you go up to a patch of yarrow, you can smell it distinctly. It's got a very distinct and unique smell. Pick a leaf and mash it up in your hand and smell it. You can smell the medicinal properties that this plant has to offer. It smells like Band-Aids, I'm going to say straight up. If you know what a fresh Band-Aid smells like, when you wrap it out of the package, it's exactly what it smells like. So the root of yarrow is a fibrous taproot like you can find in a wild carrot. Pick this one out of the ground. This one's about 3 feet tall. This is about as big as they come, and this one's dying off and dropping its seed heads. You can quite often see dead previous year's yarrow standing in the ditch where the patch is. For the purposes of medicine, the first year plants are the best to use. The grains just coming fresh out of the ground, luckily at any time of year for this plant, are dense with its medicinal properties and all the vitamins and nutrients it has to offer. The underside of the stem is a white, distinct color arising out of its green leaves. It has a dull yellow look to the top of the stem and has a rubbery texture. Since ideally you want to use a first year yarrow plant for medicine, you should get into the habit of identifying this plant by its leaves alone, although you can use its dead standing flower previous years to help make an ID. I'd describe these leaves as very fern-like, although much smaller and much finer. This plant can grow almost anywhere, although it typically doesn't grow in wet, marshy, rich soils. It's usually found in dry, open, disturbed sites with acidic soils. This plant we're looking at right here is called Yellow Clintonia, also known as blue bead lily. This plant traditionally and modern is used as a wild edible. The leaves are typically eaten raw, although some recipes call for cooked leaves. These leaves are normally used when the plant is shooting up early in the spring. Like right now, there's still some young plants coming up right here. Some plants are more mature and they're starting to flower. Later on in the mid to late summer, August, September, these plants will develop large blue berries, look strikingly similar to the berries on blue cohosh. At this point, however, the plant is generally useless to foragers. It's only used young because when it gets older, the young tender leaves become harsh and bitter. This plant normally has 3, but can have up to 5, rarely more, basal leaves coming right out of the base of the stem here, clasping around the stem. This plant normally has 3 leaves, although on occasion it produces more. There's a few here producing 4 leaves, like one here, rarely 5. I rarely see 5 leaves, normally 3. They usually grow, one clasping over the other and a center one, as you can see from the top here. So if you look closely at each one of these plants, you can see that each leaf only has one main vein up the center of the leaf. There's no other veins along the side. Besides that one main vein there in the center, it's a smooth, pale green leaf. Almost kind of satin in color. Not much of a shine to it unless you're reflecting direct light upon it. The underside looks almost identical to the top of it. Very, very little difference in color whatsoever. It's a very, very simple leaf. It's broad. As you can see, these leaves can get quite large. I've got a medium average size hand, but it's a pretty large leaf. Some of these are starting to produce their flowers and grow their stalks, where later they will produce berries and reproduce. Birds eat these berries and spread the berries elsewhere. They spread the seeds, producing new colonies of plants. These blue berries are poisonous to humans. They're inedible. So the only time this plant is normally used is early in the spring when the shoots are coming up, and it's used as a salad green. Later on, not much good. From time to time out during a walk, I've munched on the leaves of this plant as a trailside nibble. I probably pick plants about that size. I don't pick plants that have the flowers developed because of the bitter taste. Although this is probably about the largest you'd want to pick this plant, because even then, it's past the stage where it's a shoot. You can start to taste the bitter taste. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but many people prefer this when it's just coming up out of the ground. It has a mild cucumber-like taste. It's super tender. The berries on this plant are normally about 10 to 12 millimeters across, so a little less than half an inch. You can see anywhere from 4 to 6 berries on each plant, occasionally, but very rarely more. The flowers are fairly long and they're cup-shaped. They can be anywhere from 1 to 3 centimeters long. Here's a view of the whole entire plant growing out of the ground. It's got a fibrous rhizome system with a brown, almost paper sheath growing over the base of the plant. The base of the plant starts off poking up out of the ground past this brown sheath and is pure white to a cream color. then rising up to this very simple pale green broad leaves. Again, 3, sometimes 4 and rarely 5 leaves poking up out of the ground right from the base. The leaves are 3/4 clasping around the plant. Inside the plant, growing straight out of the center of the layered leaf system, is the middle stem that holds the flower system. Some of the documentation that I've read has indicated that historically the root has been used for medicine, although I've personally only ever used this plant in the early spring as an edible. This plant houses some reproduction and the spreading of its roots and shooting up new plants. Although it's a relatively small colony, it mainly spreads to new places through its berries. These plants are typically found in shaded mixed forest. Mixed is in hardwood and coniferous. It likes moist soil. It's a fairly water hefty plant. There's a lot of water. And the leaves are very tender. They're easily damaged and bruised and leave a clear visible mark of damage very quickly upon damage to the leaf. Quickly turns dark when the leaves are crushed. There's next to no smell. It's Yellow Clintonia, or blue bead lily.